Hi, Wayne Doorband here for the biweekly NTP CEED webinar huddle that we hold here at our Northern Colorado headquarters in Loveland, Colorado, both live here at our site and also going out over the web to those of you that are watching. Enjoy what we have for you today. Got with me here, a good friend. It's cool to be able to do this with friends. Yeah. Mike Butts, who, what about 6 or 7 years we've known each other?
I think so, right? Something like that. Everything I've been an intern at here to we do community gardening together.
Yeah.
So.
And Mike took our class 2 years ago now on indoor agriculture. He's got aquaponic systems in his home and in his office and all kinds of things. So we'll get into all that different stuff. So as you know, we use kind of the same format every week when we do this. And I've got a series of questions that I'm going to ask Mike. Some of them are ones that he's probably less comfortable with than others, but we'll just go ahead with them and we'll ask him that way.
Yep, that works.
Yeah, so the first one is just tell me a little bit about yourself and your current sort of business and life situation.
Okay. I am a worship and arts pastor at Grace Place Church in Berthoud, which is just down the road from the business here. And I graduated with a degree in printmaking and drawing from the Kansas City Art Institute. What else? So my responsibilities as a pastor, it's a fairly large church, so I'm part of a staff. I cover the worship and arts. So part of my responsibility is looking over and coaching a worship leader team for the singing part of our services. I do stage sets, and we might see a couple pictures of that later on. I do, it feels like anything that's kind of artsy, I'm gonna be tackling it. All the way down to this afternoon, I'll be, after the webinar, I'll be building a stage prop for this weekend services. So it's a little of everything. Along with that, I'm the pastor that's for what we like to call palingenesis. It's a term for renewal of all things. It comes from a Greek philosophy idea, and it ends up, Jesus said, at the renewal of all things, when the disciples ask about apocalyptic sorts of things and the end of the world, and he talked about the renewal. And so part of what we have been leaning into as a church are kind of going green, thinking about how to take care of creation, how to look at things in a better way. And so the major responsibility I have these days is a community garden we call the Urban Farm at Grace Place.
And tell us, how big is Berthoud, by the way, just so people know.
I think it's a bedroom community. I think it's probably 3,000 to 4,000. Surrounding areas a little more. Our demographic studies have said there are about 150,000 people within a 5 to 8 mile radius. So it's a fairly populated area. Berthoud is a small town, has a small town feel, but feeds a lot of, Longmont, Loveland, Denver, Fort Collins, Greeley.
And those of you who have watched before, and if you haven't seen this one, you should go back and watch the replay of it. Tracy Long spoke to us back a couple of webinars before. Berthoud is in a sort of a rebirth situation as it relates to local economy. And there are several examples of some very successful businesses there that are local to Berthoud, and yet they're getting regional sort of play. And one of them is a brewery, actually called City Star, that's gotten recognized all over the western United States, based in Berthoud, Colorado.
Right.
Also, Tracy is heading up something called Berthoud Local, where in just the last 2 years, there are now 2 different urban farms, one, the one that Mike's working with, that I work with on a regular basis, and then another one in a park in town. And so there's a real movement going on. And the reason I asked about Berthoud is that it's also my home, and I don't talk about it a lot, but it does feel like that 3,000 to 4,000 person place.
Yeah,
but
a bit may vary.
Yeah, but it's not, in the sense that, as you said, within 8, 10 miles, there's 150,000 or more people. So it really is this little place that is in the middle of a much bigger population area.
Especially along the Front Range.
Yeah.
You get a lot of... Yeah.
And it does feel kind of Mayberry-ish, right?
Right. And so we find for the population of our church, only, I mean, we're at about 11 or 1,200 a week average attendance, and so obviously not a third of the quarter of the population of Berthoud is showing up for church, although we think that would be nice. A lot of people are driving just a few miles from Longmont, Loveland, Johnstown, east.
By the way, I know there's people. How many in this room? We have a younger audience. How many of you even know what we mean when we say Mayberry-like? One person. So Mayberry comes from an old television show that had Opie and who was it? What was
it was Andy Griffith.
What was his name though on the show?
And,
he didn't go by Andy Griffith. He went by something else.
No, I think he did.
Did he
went
go
by
Andy?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, the jail and the city hall of Mayberry was smaller than this room. For those of you that are,
and
it wasn't any bigger than this.
Fuddling assistant.
Don Knotts. Don Knotts. Well, anyway, Berthoud, real town, has a city office and jail, which isn't a whole lot bigger than this room. So that is accurate.
Yeah.
And then it's got a city park that to me is always very Midwesternish. I mean, it's the town obviously sort of built around a park that is there, which you just don't see in modern cities anymore.
It's still a square, park square almost, and it's very nice. Some bronze sculptures and whatnot. So
I want to give a pitch real quick because I'll forget it if I don't say it now because I mentioned it to somebody else earlier today. You may not even be aware of it. Tomorrow in our part of the world is a TEDx.
Oh,
did you know that?
In Loveland?
Yes. At the Rialto Theater tomorrow from 2 to 5 is a TEDx conference, and if you've never been to a TEDx conference, really highly recommend it. You'll hear people like Mike that'll be giving pitches about whatever they do, and I think they're required to be 18 minutes or less. And they've been highly screened, so they get selected out of hundreds that they knock down to about 10 or so that present. And I think it's from 2 to 5 tomorrow at the Rialto. And I'm hoping to go over there. I'm actually worried that it might be sold out. I was thinking I could buy a ticket at the door.
The Rialto is not huge.
Yeah, it's not that big.
380 seats. Yeah. I see the picture of the new facility up there. So Grace Place has been dreaming. We've been stuck in this facility. It's a bit too small, a bit awkward. And that's our dream facility that we've been working at, and that's actually the whole build out. We're looking at about the left half of that for our first phase, and so we're looking at a new facility that we're hoping to break ground on very soon. The land will be paid off, and anyway, so that's been part of my consuming passion for the last 6 to 9 months that we've been working on this project. So we're really excited about it. It feels good to finally get some digs. That right now we're stretched out in sort of a light industrial area among 3 buildings. We'll be in one central location. And a lot of what we like at Grace Place is really a connect for the community. So there'll be walking paths, and it'll be a lot more than just a place for worship for the faithful. It'll be a community connect.
Yeah, one of the things I know that it's done, this picture shows it. So this picture is taken from the perspective of looking from the west towards what will be the campus, and it's taken looking down a little bit. But if you were down lower, it's 287, the highway that goes right past, which has 30,000 people a day that are on it. And one of the things that I think I've heard said is that your entry should be your gateway. In other words, there's a statement. I'm forgetting what
Mel McGowan says that most churches moon the community. They put their backside facing the road, and thereby moon the community. Okay. So we're interested in people actually seeing what's going on and wanting to be part of the community at various levels. If you want to just have your kid come play in the water, it's a good place to do that. Some hiking trails, and we're hoping it'll be a good, as well as Grace Place has the cafe right now, which most of you eating at the cafe. It's a good place to eat, and it's a full breakfast, lunch cafe that runs 6 days a week, and we'll be extending that out, and it should be ramped up to nicer, fresh whole foods, organic, and so we've really upped the game to be a lot more of a sustainable and delicious place.
And this is going to become the gateway to this town of Berthoud. We've been talking literally. It's just where people have to come
turning
off
right off. Yeah. Say take a right at the big the big beautiful building.
Right. Well, tell us where you grew up a little bit, and what was, I want very specific, and this one I did prep him for.
Yeah.
Give us one event from your youth that you remember that caused you to pursue the current life path that you're on.
Okay. Well, first of all, I was born in Gillette, Wyoming, because Moorcroft doesn't have a hospital. Big booming metropolis. That's actually from the 20s, but it's what I had. And
he's not that old, by the way.
No,
that picture
I'm not that old.
That picture's a little bit.
Yeah, that was an old postcard. And my parents moved shortly after that to Boulder, so I grew up in Boulder, and it was a pretty wild place in the 70s, obviously. My parents were both from small towns, and so I think I got a great blend of small town and large town. And so I think one of the... my parents, they passed away about a year and a half ago. They were sort of... I'd say they were party animals, and in Boulder in the 70s, they were fairly reserved as far as I don't think they did a lot of illicit drugs like the culture was those days, but certainly a kind of a party atmosphere there. That's what people think of when they think of Boulder in the 70s, and so what do you do when you grow up in a party family? You rebel, and so you become a religious fanatic, right? That's just like it's really sticking it to the man or something. So from an early age, I'm not sure why. It was just my calling, maybe. I became a very devout person. I mean, my parents were concerned, not that I was out partying too much, but that I was too religious, just to be. And a funny thing happened along with that. I mean, if not a funny thing, but at one point I actually had a dream that I was with a group of friends, and there Jesus appeared in the white robe and everything, and my friends just like, hey, how's it going? Kind of high five, and I fell down on my knees and before him, and it's funny. That was not much of a guiding dream for me. I didn't think about that. I didn't feel like it was extremely visionary until probably in my 30s. And then when I look back, I said, like, no, I think that was sort of about a life path for me. And so I've been so that sort of devout person, and not so much religious as very devout to try to be authentic to Christian faith, and at some point that has led me to full-time pastor role.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now here's another one that's interesting. When you were 15 years old in Boulder,
yeah,
and it's a beautiful Saturday afternoon, just gorgeous. What would we find you doing?
Oh, I would be up at Indian Peaks Wilderness area, hiking, backpacking. I think of crazy. I don't think I was more than probably 15 when my parents would let a friend and I head out and just backpack for 2 or 3 days at a time, winter and summer. I was involved with Boy Scouts because that was a good access to the outdoors, and so we did backpacking, cross-country skiing, and year-round. So I spent a lot of time in.
Again, funny thing, times have changed. So I had the experience of having, like you, I love being outdoors, and I had a cousin who was 10 years older than me, and when I remember vividly when I was 6 to 10 years old, we would go camping, our two families, so my uncle and aunt and my cousins and me and my family, and my 15, 16-year-old cousin would just take off. We'd get there at 5 in the afternoon on Friday, and he'd come back sometime Sunday before we were going to leave. How many people would let their kids do that today?
I don't know.
You're just afraid of whatever of happening.
Yeah,
I just don't think
perhaps times have changed. My parents in small towns, like my dad probably started driving, consistently driving around town and all over the county and who knows the state by the time he was 14. So maybe that's a little bit of a cultural transition. Maybe, I don't know. But I did a lot of camping and backpacking and survived it.
This next question, as I prepped you for it, you actually said, no, I don't, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Can you tell us about one person who influenced you in your youth to have a major, to have any major life experiences that you've experienced sort of as an adult? And I think your answer was no, not specific, or no, it's hard for me.
Yeah, so many people.
Yeah, because you said there was a bunch. So maybe just give some thoughts that way.
I'd say a couple things. I had a really good friend, Jim, whose mom at one point, because I didn't really have a very clear career path, direction, vocational path, and she was kind enough and to point out strengths I had and passions and skills, and kind of point me in the direction of fine art and sculptural and drawing and that area. There's probably a major influence on me in that sense. Also, when I was in high school, I was a part of a church youth group. It was a very large Presbyterian church, and there was a guy there who formed one of the little Bible studies, the little fellowship group kinds of things, as those kind of evangelical typical. And his name was Rick, and he had been a missionary in Iran, and before the revolution. And for some reason, he had like a deep spiritual passion also, and so that kind of instilled in me, I think, further along the pathway. So I'd say those two people were a pretty major influence.
Are you a natural artist? Stuff comes easy for you?
I'm naturally very creative, more in the brain. Some skills, when I was in printmaking and drawing, this is a great example. I had a drawing for designers. I thought I'd be practical and go into graphic design at one point. I had a graphic art class, part of it was drawing for designers. And the professor looked at me after I completed a pen and ink, and there were all these, very meticulous, very nice drawings from the students, and I was just kind of scratching. It's like, ooh, beefy. And so from then on, I decided, like, there's no way I'm going to go into graphic design. It wasn't going to happen. And so I went into printmaking, where I could be beefy with my drawing. And so it's been a very difficult process of skills in some ways, but in other ways, I think the creative aspect has been, and it's been a lifelong. I attended the Kansas City Art Institute,
Cool. Here's one I know you gave us a bunch of different answers for, so this is going to be fun. What does the term sustainability mean to you? And I know you've got some notes there, so don't.
Yeah, if I feel like I think a lot of our culture right now, both in the sustainability and the religious culture, is driven by the apocalypse, and the big apocalypse. Whether it's the Left Behind sort of apocalypse, I like the graphic novelish middle-aged illuminated manuscripts that you'll probably see some of the images coming up. That they lack the horrific blood and guts, and so I find that frequently the sustainability folks, the green folks, are sort of driven by that apocalyptic sort of, I spent so many years, my wife and I were part of the religious right in the 80s when that was big, the moral majority, and oh my goodness, I'll fess up right now, I was actually at a Pat Robertson rally when he announced his presidency.
Ooh.
I was there.
Wow.
I was a little naively pulled in, but I was there. And so I've been part of all of that stuff, protests, and I spent so many years living and thinking about what I was against. And so I just would like to leave that behind and live for what I'm for instead of against. And so I like, and we very well could be, we've been taking bad care of the earth for long enough. There's a good chance, we're messing it up. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But I'd rather focus on sustainability being a quality of life that it is more generous and loving, that's more kinder both into creation and to people, and as well as social justice, reaching out into helping people who don't have the basic necessities. How can we bring that to people in the widest circle possible? And that's what I like. And so when I'm watching a documentary and it gets into that apocalyptic, the end of the world, I just tend to shut it off a little more than really open up to it. And I was just thinking over. I was actually around probably, I think it was in junior high, the first Earth Day. And I can remember doing a science project of going out, and so I've been around for the long haul, going out and taking Polaroid pictures, black and white Polaroid pictures that you would peel apart, probably caustic for the environment, on the first Earth Day for a science project. And,
by the way, Mike and I are probably about 8 years or so apart in age, and so I was in college when the first Earth Day occurred, and so it's interesting how you have a little different perspective, and of the timing in your life.
There's ecology now.
Yeah. And a little bit aside before I ask you the next question, just about sustainability. Justin, who isn't in here right now, and he'll be back in the room in just a few minutes, was telling us a story this morning. So Sunday, I was visiting with him here at our headquarters, and he had his niece here with him. And his niece is about 6 years old. She is Native American, and I knew that. And I didn't know that she was visiting because I wasn't aware she had come in. Well, she was out here for just about a week and was headed back to her home, which is on the reservation, the Navajo reservation in Arizona. So today, I think she's back there. And then this weekend, is that right, Josh? Do we hear? I'm looking at people in the room here. He's going to be going and visiting her in Arizona. And when I was with her on the weekend, this was just an active, very typical, middle America 6-year-old, right? Asking questions, running around, complaining about a few things, being excited about, typical. Well, she's going home to the reservation where she lives in, I'm going to call it a teepee type structure. There's a name for it that they use on their reservation.
Six-sided hogan? Is it not quite that?
It's like a hogan, but it's actually got a different name that they call it specifically for the Navajo. And it's wood. It's dirt floored, and there are 12 people that live in it.
Wow.
They have no running water. They have no electricity, and they live off the land. And here's what I think most people, if you heard about her living in those circumstances, would think: poor girl, she lives in such horrible situations. While she was here visiting, when she would get upset about something, she told Justin, "I want to go home. I'd like to go home. Can I go home?"
Yeah.
It can't be that horrible for that 6-year-old who is living and having that sort of feeling. The fact is, she probably sees her life as being as sustainable or more sustainable than many of us who live in what we think are so much better sorts of circumstances. So anyway, that's just a little bit of an aside on the sustainability perspective. Is there a person in the green movement or sustainability or environmental area, anything, that has had a profound impact on your life? So not a person necessarily you're close to, but just you've read about, you've heard of, whatever. Anybody that fits that sort of
well, not in a really big way. And I think part of going back green and going back to more sustainable, and I should mention now, I live in Old Town Loveland. It's not a small house, but also along with that, I've got a backyard that's a little farm. And it's a messy farm because it's so small. And I have chickens, some aquaponics I'm growing, some gardening, and so I'm trying to get into that sort of urban. We're hoping we've got grapevines, hoping to add bees next year if I have some more energy and can clear some chaos. So we're plowing up our front yard and creating some both xeriscaping and also some growing space. And so I'm not sure what that had to do with everything except for sustainability.
No, it was what somebody might have.
So I think it's been returning to my roots a little bit because we lived in Kansas City, which is a fairly conservative place at the time, and the culture we were with, particularly the religious culture we were with. So I think it's returning back to our roots. And of course, I don't want to embarrass you, but our friendship has really edged me in that direction a lot more. Got me excited about aquaponics and some gardening and I think it's sort of a general culture I see in my neighborhood. We're starting to cooperate.
You told me about a neighbor.
My neighbor Jeff. We do projects together, encourage each other along the path, talk about growing stuff. When he needs a helping hand with some big chunk of iron that he's trying to make into a table, I'll show up and help him. He comes over and helps me. So I think it's sort of local-based and community, feel. That's and of course I live in an old neighborhood. We don't have an HOA. We depend on keeping up with the Joneses and not making your neighbors upset. So it works quite well for us.
Well, I know how artistic Mike is, and his whatever he designs is probably going to be the top of the Joneses list just because it looks so cool. And he's complaining about how his yard looks, but I bet it still looks better than most of the neighborhood.
Well, I won't go there.
So you've had lots of interesting life experiences, and this is kind of the point where we just sort of open it up. And I know Leanne's putting some pictures up. Just talk about some things just broadly in your life.
So
that have been cool.
I graduated with printmaking, painting, or printmaking and drawing degree from the Kansas City Art Institute, and my wife in photography. And over time, I lost my printmaking studio with my cooperative partner, moved to St. Louis, and so kind of lost the etching press that I was working with and started doing photography. And for whatever reason, very low-tech photography struck my fancy. And so I started messing around with pinhole cameras. And so I brought one just because most people don't know what it is. So this is my camera. You'll see some images come up there, black and white. Those are 4x5. And let's back up there. Right here.
Yeah.
So I've got 4x5 film that goes on this, and I use Scotch tape, and it shows up in the images quite frequently. And it doesn't have lenses; it just has little tiny apertures, pinpricks in brass sheets. And so what you sacrifice in the technology is time and a little bit of sharpness. So you don't get really sharp images. They have incredible depth of field, but the exposures are quite long.
So this picture,
this is one of my images, and that was from a trip my wife and I took to Maine last September. And there's probably a few others. One is from Braywa Wilderness, which is in Colorado. So my wife and I go take vacations, and we'll go out and photograph.
And that's these are taken with that camera.
Right.
Wow, those are cool.
And so what happens with this particular camera is, rather than a straight, the thing I like about pinhole is that once you throw away the piece of glass for a lens, it gives you all kinds of opportunities. You can make images that are more like the vision that lives inside of you. Let's put it that way. And so there are 3 pinholes, and they overlap in this. And so when you're looking at an image, you're actually looking at what I like to think of as like an exposure. You generally, when you experience something, your head is moving, your body's moving, things are in motion, and you remember a compilation of all those things. And so I've got 3 points of view that are all merging onto one piece of film.
So on this one, you're seeing that here, and
right.
The longer you look at it, you're seeing
you kind of separate out those because the pinholes are at 60-degree angles across that surface. The exposure stays the same, but the what exposes it changes, so things collide.
And how long will you allow that exposure to occur then?
Oh, it'll go anywhere from 5 or 10 seconds, and that's about the shortest I can pull tape off and put it back on. Very low tech tape. And so that all the way up to about 2 minutes. And if I can't get an exposure in 2 minutes, I just say forget it, because the nature of film is made for that. I don't know. I could go into it technically. I'm not a highly technical person either. But
and if you like doing this, I'm sure there's a place online you can go. Right? You're not the only one.
You just Google pinhole and you'll get a lot. Okay. In fact, the last Sunday in April is traditionally Worldwide Pinhole Photography Day, and I celebrated it this last Sunday afternoon. In the past, there were probably a good run of 10 years where I led workshops on people who didn't know how to do pinhole photography. It can be very low tech, so we typically use like a little quart paint can, a cardboard box. You put a little piece of little hole in a piece of aluminum pop can, tape it on there, and you've got a camera. And this last piece that has color in it.
This is beautiful.
That's actually about 4 by 5 feet. It's mixed media painted over. So it's an image from Labyrinth Canyon on the Green River in Utah.
Wow.
So I have a good friend, Mark, that I introduced to pinhole photography, and he helped me get some technical things ironed out because I'm not very technical. And we taught workshops together on Worldwide Pinhole Day for quite a few years.
Neat.
So, and that's one of them we had at the church, and And as well as I used to curate a gallery at Grace Place, so it's a mosaic gallery.
Cool.
For anybody who's tuning into the side images. So anyway, so pinhole photography is one of them. The other thing I think it's been really important to me is community. Oh, there's aquaponics. How can I not mention aquaponics? So I did probably not a full internship here, but I volunteered for quite some time and jumped in on some lessons and stuff. This is a little aquaponics system I had in my office for a demo because our church faith community is trying to figure out how to help people in less enabled areas, and we think aquaponics stands a good chance of feeding people better, and so we've been leaning into that. And you'll see a little video I did. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so that was a 5-gallon aquarium that I ran some tubes and yogurt. It was all very impromptu. I grew stuff for my lunch in that for quite some time. And at some point, the design was so precarious to maintenance, I finally just took it apart. I couldn't get to the fish very well, and I couldn't, fixed water. I don't know. It was crazy, but it was a good experiment. And right now, I've been working with like the half-gallon or half 55-gallon drum, and with an upright drum, a pretty traditional small start. And I have one of those that replaced that, and it's growing a lot better. I shouldn't have a picture of that. And then I have one at home, and I've been working on building a small greenhouse that can extend my growing season out with I think about a 144-gallon fish tank, and then whatever that will sustain with growth in the soil. And I think it's really important. Like I said, we're trying to bring justice and love and kindness and a more sustainable life wherever we can, whether it's clean water or better food. And so I've been the spearhead at church on the staff to sort of experiment with that. And we've actually been developing systems as far away as Madera, Mexico, sustaining them. So
you started to talk about
community. Before aquaponics. So I think community is everything, and I feel just incredibly blessed. Not only do I have an amazing wife and kids, I've been married for 31, 32 years now. I have a group of friends that we have been kind of walking along the path of life together for a good 15, 18 years now. Most of them are highly creative. There's my bride again. Whew. Get distracted. A group of friends that just feel like I can't describe it any other way than just a providential, divine providence blessing for our life. We have some friends that we had way back in art school, so we've known them since we were all 18 or 19, who we all lived and shared a house together, who moved out about 12, 15 years ago, and so they live a couple blocks away. And I think there's probably some artwork of different people. So there's a group, and networks always kind of spread out with various tiers, but for the immediate folks that we have consistently rubbed shoulders with, done life with, we babysit, watch their house, we weep with each other, we laugh with each other. And most of them are in various creative fields.
Cool.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one. What about a negative experience in your life? What's a memorable negative experience that's had an influence on you? So it's something that was negative, but actually ended up having a positive, memorable sort of impact on you moving ahead.
Boy. Nothing comes to mind more quickly than a period of time, let's say like this last fall. I had somebody that I worked very closely with at church, and they resigned, and in the midst of that, they were angry with me, which is okay. We can deal with that. But in the midst of that, there were accusations against my character, and I don't mind if somebody levels with me, but it just ended up there was such a the experience that this person felt like, and the other people around me. And it's okay. I think all of us, it's really healthy and good when somebody says, you whatever, you pick your nose in public, and everybody goes like, yeah. But in this case, it was you have this big issue and a couple big issues, and the people around me said, that doesn't sound like you. And so, but it was a very well-loved and liked person, and somebody that I loved very much. And the difference between this person's experience and mine was so polarized that there was not a way to bridge the gap very easily, and certainly without losing a huge amount of dignity. And so after a month or two of sort of a standoff, we in fact, the church offered to pay for professional mediators, and it just was a decision not to follow up with that. And so it was just very painful. I mean, like night after night. And part of the, because this person was very well respected, there's sort of a sense of, well, maybe that is true about you, and I just didn't see it. And among some of my coworkers, and that was very painful. It was and perhaps for people who have been, I've only been in a church ministry for 5 or 6 years now. Before that, and some people my age have been, pastoring for so many years. This is like, oh, that happens all the time. So it can. Not all the time, but it happens frequently. And so it just shook me to my core. I mean, both faith, the number of nights I laid awake, tossing and turning. And I'd say of the negative, I mean, it was very, very shaking to the core for me, of many foundational things. One of the maybe blessings that came out of it, I don't know how many people out there consistently read through Scripture as much as I do, and it's my professional job. So, but there are the book of Psalms in the Old Testament, and there are places where, truthfully, in the past, I've read the Psalms from King David, and I'm like, what a whiner! It's just like these kind of over dramatic, and somewhat of that is cultural. I think in Middle Eastern cultures, it's very typical for people to be demonstrative. I mean, if they're angry or they're upset, they rip their clothes, and like it's not like us in some ways. And I think it's a really healthy thing. In some cases, I've just felt like David was being very melodramatic about things, and now I found such solace in those psalms that I never did before. So it opened up a whole section of life to me, and that there's actually official, from a Judaic culture, lament where you shake your fist at God and you say, this is not right, it's unfair. And in the Judaic tradition and Christian tradition, that's, well, at least in a healthy Christian tradition, that's an acceptable expression of faith rather than a lack of faith and doubt.
Sure.
And so I think that expanded. The other takeaway I've had is that I have been extremely diligent in pursuing nurturing a culture where it's expected and a natural part of dialogue and relationship that when you're upset about something or if there's a misunderstanding, you kind of out it and talk about it. Because I think if the situation that was so hard for me, if this person had been able to, or if I had been listening, I mean, that there would have been a coming together long before two divergent. And so I've been encouraging people to say, if you disagree, please say something. Mm-hmm. This is and to be very frank and honest with people. And when I get that look, or somebody says like, wow, what you said didn't make sense to me, or like, I want to go pursue that because I want to develop a culture that nourishes differing opinions but also is really healthy about dealing with those things. And so that's the out, and I'm still discovering what the path, what that looks like. and trying to celebrate that as much as I can.
Thanks for being open with us about that. That's hurtful, and it was recent. So
still painful. But
yeah.
Anyway,
here's a fun one, a little more on the other side, because you actually shared one with me earlier. If this is not the one you talk about, but what's a skill, a tool maybe that you've learned fairly recently that has been influencing you today in the way you're doing business? You shared with us a little earlier today, actually. So. About the magic box or whatever.
Black Magic Design.
Black Magic. So think of tools.
It's amazing. If you recall back to the beginning of the deal, there was some footage of the church I work at, Grace Place, and it's a circus. I mean, we're using projectors and creating a digital environment. I like to say back in the day, when you look at the history of worship, it's always been stacking stones and lighting fires. And these days, we're using buildings, and we're using a lot of projection for that to create our environment. And so one of those items is Black Magic Design. We're leaning into new, really powerful and really cheap, considering and time-consuming, space-consuming items that help us to capture what we're doing. And I think a Black Magic Design, you can see like it's the whole projection environment there and stage set. We're finding that there are these new technologies, and Black Magic Design, I think, is an amazing company in cranking out cameras, video switchers. We replaced 2 boxes that were 6-foot-high rack cases with essentially something the size of a power strip.
Wow.
For our video capture stuff. And so I think there's an amazing amount of technology out there that we should just jump in on, obviously, that's been really good. The other thing we're leaning into these days that's been really exciting is how to create better stories, because I don't think people are interested in being convinced by the dogmatic truth as much anymore. People have actually, I mean, that's a Enlightenment, post-Enlightenment paradigm, and I think people have always been more moved and defined who they are by stories around the campfire. And so we're trying to learn how to tell better stories about what's going on and what we think are God movements in people's lives, stories about love and reconciliation, healing, the kinds of things that Jesus promised. So.
Well, there's already a slide up here, so this sort of preface of the next question. What's a book you've read recently that's influencing you today? And there's a picture up here. So.
Yeah, John is Knutsler.
Yeah,
I think I actually heard him from you guys, and had just picked up that book because I thought it was and his blog, which I won't repeat the title of, but he's one of those kind of caustic, humorous kinds of guys. I was actually really enlightened by his whole. Let's see. The basic treatise for the book is that humankind has experienced a bubble of affluence, wealth, creation, and all that it entails. Culture exchange with the extraction of petroleum out of the ground. It created this vast amount of wealth and just culture, really, very much cultural bump in the road, and that it's a limited supply, not forever supply, and that his supposition after a lot of study is that the peak outflow is somewhere around the 70s and will taper off slowly, and so it fits along with my anti-apocalyptic. What he talks about is not an apocalyptic destruction of culture, but a fairly rapid draining of that supply will lead to a different kind of culture. And the way he describes it is much more of a middle-aged culture before the invention of a lot of tools, because without cheap oil, it's hard to produce the kinds of goods we've been used to. And so that made me rethink. It's a good time, and again, it's always good and healthy to love the people locally. and to interact with people locally in community. It's always, and so it's worthwhile leaning into just thinking about quality of life. It's always good to put good stuff in your mouth. As the famous Rick Warren says, it's better to eat a plant than something that was produced in a plant, in his little two-line quip. And so I think that sort of is a general path for life that seems to be really, really healthy and seem like a loving and generous and wonderful community building. And I think the observations from his book are very well researched, and again, he avoids that sort of apocalyptic. Although when you talk about a change over, a generation is
right.
somewhat possible.
How many of you in the room have you
guys read
that book or heard of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Check it out. Yeah. Well, here's one that's sort of aligned, and I don't know I didn't see any notes from this. Do you have a quote from someone that's famous that you can remember that you really think that our audience should hear because it's memorable to you? You've given us a bunch of other things, but do you have any one specifically?
Nothing specifically stood out to me.
Cool.
I could probably quote the Lord's Prayer or something that has been.
Right.
I have been. Here I am. I've been. Self-admitted religious fanatic since I was probably about 14. And the last couple of years, I have taken a whole different look at the compilation of memoirs and letters that form our Christian scriptures, the Bible. And I just, with a totally honest, head-on look, and say, like, this guy's a lunatic, or is crazy, or what he says challenges me to the core. And the people around him, the people the disciples, apostles, whatever they were labeled, they were the closest. And when they wrote memoirs, they said the same thing. Everybody said, like, whoa, this is hard. And so I just love that fresh look these days of looking at the scriptures and the problems that were tackled in the first century. And if, people these days say, like, oh, the Bible's not relevant anymore. Our culture, as it unwinds, as a natural cycle of cultures, our culture is more alike the culture of the day, when those documents were written and penned, than any other time in history, probably, or at least in recent Anglo history. And so they seem to come alive to me in new ways and than ever before. And I love that about the scripture. And so I'm challenged more and more by what the people who are closest to Jesus in their memoirs wrote about it. And I'm constantly challenged. And asking the same question. When a guy says, out of you will flow living water, does my life feel so abundant like that? Like everything is gushing out.
Yeah.
When he talks about the other things about fruitfulness of life and healing, is it just hyperbole, or is there something about it that's true to the core in the most poetic and profound way?
Cool.
And and we don't have enough time to read the whole New Testament right now. That would be my quote.
My computer switched to my calendar. One of the things I don't like, I took away what we're seeing on the screen. One of the things I don't like about Windows 8 is it whenever you get an announcement for something you're supposed to do next,
it tells you.
I
think I need that.
Here's the last question.
Yeah.
And it's one that I stole from another podcast host that I really admire. His name's John Lee Dumas. He does a Entrepreneur on Fire podcast. But I think it's a great question. So we always end with this, which is, let's assume that you woke up this morning and you were in a different place. It was obvious you were not where you were the night before. It appeared like it was this planet. It appeard like everything was similar to where it is today. You had a laptop sitting in front of you, and you had $500. And you'd kind of been awake long enough that it was pretty apparent that your day-to-day needs have sort of been taken care of. You've got 7 days. What are you going to do with that laptop and $500 in this sort of new place that you've now been placed in? You don't have any friends. It's just you. There's a lot of people out there to influence. But what will you do? What's your next 7 days going to be with $500 and a laptop?
My sincere hope, one of the things that has given me a lot of joy in life, and is interesting because in the New Testament documents toward the end, frequently talks about a party at the end, and it looks like a wedding feast, and I like celebrations of that. And so the thing that moves me to the core is people gathering for whatever reason. What comes out of their souls tends to be music, and we see that across humankind. It's no mistake in the Old Testament documents. As soon as somebody and in the Greek culture, when somebody has something really important to say, what do? They break out in poetry and singing, right? And so, and you find that in the probably universally. And so I would try my very best to find a group of people who worshipped in the very core of my being is worship Jesus Christ, and I would gather with those people and I would celebrate with singing. And the other thing you see universally is people sharing meals together. It's no surprise that Jesus, a sacrament, sacred thing for a ritual was a meal. Okay, so it's like we have thimblefuls and a cracker. It's sort of strange, but it's typical. It's a symbol for sharing food, and that's the exact same thing at the very end of the Bible. What does it say? People do. They gather in a city and they sing, and it's a big party. And so I would find people and I would celebrate with food and with singing and with prayers and with poetry and artistic expression. If I could do it. And of course, hopefully for $500 and a laptop, I could find those people who have that same passion and gather with them. And so that would be my hope. Yeah.
Well, this has been awesome. We're just about on time here. Is there any questions from anybody in the room or online? I'm looking at the chat room, so it's your chance now if you've got questions online. Right. Anybody in the room? Questions for Mike? So I'm going to end on something just that touched me today, and I'm curious as I say this about how it touches you. It actually touched me over the weekend, but I've been trying to do it over the last 4 or 5 days now, or actually 4 days. A guy named Brendan Bouchard, who actually does a number of these podcasts and is becoming well known. If anybody in the room heard of that name, Brendan Bouchard, except Josh, you've heard of it, but anybody else? Watch for this guy. He's 35 years old. And I think he's going to be the next Oprah or Wayne Dyer or Tony Robbins, sort of that kind of a person. He's that dynamic. So be watching. You'll see him, I think, on television and in the media and other things. And one of the reasons he doesn't do a whole lot new. He copies a lot, and he goes back to the Bible, for one. He believes in a lot of the teachings of the Bible and in a lot of things you talked about today. But he also goes back to writings about what it meant to be successful and such that are used by people that are the generation ahead of Oprah. So people like Andrew Carnegie and some of those teachers, Napoleon Hill, that were like in the 1920s and such. Right. And then you had Oprah and that, and now we have another group. And this guy is sort of the next generation. And here's what he talks about, really simply. And just think about this. And start to do this over the next period of days. Just as your day goes on, think of 2 things. All right, 1, with where I'm at right now in this instance, where would I rate myself on a scale of 1 to 10 of how I am projecting myself to anyone around me? All right, so you and I are interacting. I'm interacting with the room right now, and I'm interacting with all of you on the internet. So how do I rank myself? Where's my scale? Where am I at on that scale of 1 to 10? Second question, same thing, scale of 1 to 10. How would I rank myself in terms of being the best I can be right now, right at this instant? And then he goes on. It's real simple. Here's his solution. If you're less than a 6 on either one of those, instantaneously change. Change.
Yeah.
So I'll just give you for me right now. I'm not a 10 right now as I interact or as I totally give my best, but I'm an 8 or 9. I'm pretty well up there. But you know what? there are times during my day, lots of them, when I'm only feeling a 4 or a 3 or whatever. As I've tried to just over 4 days think about that throughout my day, I have found at least 10 times when I immediately react differently.
Shifted, yeah.
I shift. I mean, it can happen that fast. You can do it that fast.
So if you hit 0, is it time to just go home and go to bed? Should probably sleep it off.
Probably go home.
Start over. Wow.
Yeah,
that's a challenge.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, end on that for everybody. It's been a great session. We're right at an hour here, which is what we've tried to keep it to. And we'll welcome a speaker. Leanne, do we have somebody scheduled? I don't know if we have a name yet for 2 weeks from now. Okay, so we've got something. Look online on our different sites. You'll find our scheduling. Come back and listen to Mike again by playing the replay. You can watch it at your leisure while you drive down the road or whatever. Actually, don't watch it. Don't watch it then. You can watch it while you're a passenger and driving down the road on your cell phone, on your tablet. That's one of the cool things about these. This is why we use this format. And we'll see you again in a couple weeks.
Thanks very much, Wayne.
Thanks.